Q, why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? And I crossed out you and said, I, or this fellow, can't handle his liquor. Why don't I try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. My willpower must be weak. I could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl, I think I'd stop for her. The doctor told him if he ever drank again, it would kill me. But there I am, all lit up again. These are questions to ask myself. Now, these are commonplace observations of drinkers, which we hear about all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Reactions to booze is what that is. So, do I believe people who can drink normally do these things um, are physically and mentally different from me? Because that's the thing. I had a lot of friends I drank with, and they were able to get stuff done. Wake up the next day and not like take off on a 3 day bender. Um, then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair. There's only three types of drinkers. What kind am I? Is the question mark. So they started with moderate drinkers, and they have a certain type of hard drinker. He does physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, say health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of the doctor, becomes operative, this man can stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult or troublesome, and may even need medical attention, like a detox. Can I stop or moderate is the question for that one. Did I start as a hard drinker? So we can start as a hard drinker, but often we led to this. 3. What about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption. That's the physical. That once I start the drink, I can't stop, and that's the key there. The question on this is, can I stay stopped on my own like a moderate or hard drinker? And it says, here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature, but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep around the clock. Yet, early next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he has misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over the house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him. To throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then he comes home one day, the day when he simply cannot make it, and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he gets to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic. Our behavior patterns vary, so there's all kinds of things you'll see. Different stuff happens, but this description should identify him roughly. So review this part. Why did I behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown me that one drink means another great disaster, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that I take that one drink? Why can't I stay stopped? That's the other question. And then what has become of my common sense and willpower that still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will be a full answer to these questions, and that's underlined, maybe someday. Um, Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. I know that while the alcoholic keeps away from the drink, as I may do for months or years, I react much like other men. I'm equally positive that once I take any alcohol, whatever, into my system, something happens. And again, all these are crossed out to personalize them with I and me, both the bodily and the mentally sense. So this is our physical craving part. Body and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for me. Um, do I drink the way I intend, essentially, is the point of this. But it makes it impossible for me to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. The cue here is, does my experience confirm this? This is the mental obsession before I drink. These observations should be, or would be, academic and pointless if I never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in my mind. And that's all underlined because it's, again, the physical craving and the mental obsession combined. And that's all with no alcohol in the body. Rather than in his body, the problem centers in the mind rather than in the body. Problem is, once we start, we can't stop, so we have both. It's like perplexing. If you ask them why they started on the last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one of 1,000 alibis. Says, I could always find an excuse to drink. Sometimes these excuses have certain plausibility, but on the side it's written all lies. And some believability to the normal person, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of the alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. And that's if I'm shown the truth about the mental obsession. Those are all the things we do. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. Another question after that, am I satisfied? But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are baffled. They're a baffled lot. This is the obsession that's underlined and defined. Obsession is an idea that outweighs all others. Obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when The sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost, and the three under that is written. Is the tragic truth acceptable? Am I powerless mentally? And then why am I powerless mentally? He has lost control, so wants to stop but can't. A certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes to a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. So the threat of death, even, and the fact of no choice, even, is of no avail. My will, my choice is a lot of times what I'll be saying. Like, I do what I want. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. The fact is that most, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. So amount and when. It says our so called willpower becomes practically non existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. So it says defenseless against that. On the side, it says the only requirements are a desire to stop. Is that enough? And will think the drink through work? So, can I think it through and will that work? The almost certain consequences that follow, taking even a glass of beer, do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. Booze is the question after that. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, and that's alcoholic insanity. Won't burn me this time, here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started? Again. Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. So my own defense, and unless locked up, may die or permanently go insane. And that's the alcoholic insanity. These stark, ugly facts have been confirmed by thousands, it says legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. So hopeless is written after that. There is a solution. And the warning here is almost none of us like the self-searching, leveling of pride, confessions of shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. These are the rules and the musts. But we saw that it really worked in others. We had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility as we'd been living it ourselves. When, therefore, we were approached by those with whom the problem had been solved. There